always what they want to work on during lessons. It's usually how to sing high notes with more power. Now, why do we want to sing high notes with more power? Well, for one thing, it's just more impressive to be able to sing something above your vocal break and do it with a lot of intensity and power and richness, right? Now, I want to emphasize that high notes are different for everyone. What is high to me might not be high for you, but it might be really high for someone else. All right. I feel like the internet just get really judgmental on what high notes mean. It's just whatever is high to you. Now, for me, anything that is above my vocal break is a high note for me. That means I am entering my head voice register. Now, before we go on to talking about the issues with singing high notes so that we can find solutions to them, I want to talk about the head voice and what's going on there. The more we understand what is happening with our head voice, the easier it is for you to figure out what you need to fix on your own. So in the head voice, your vocal folds are thinning out. They are being stretched, and your vocal folds vibrate faster to produce higher pitches. Therefore, the higher you go, the thinner it needs to get. But because they're getting so thin, it's hard for the vocal cords to come in more firmly, okay? Now, we also need to understand what's happening in the chest voice. So when you are singing low notes in the chest register, your vocal folds are shortening and they're getting thicker, and they vibrate slower to produce lower pitches. Okay, this is going to come in handy when we talk about issues when singing higher notes above the vocal break. All right, so now that you understand what's going on with the head voice, what's going on with the chest voice, understand that anytime you sing a high note, your vocal folds do not come in as firmly as they do in the chest voice. Okay, so let's talk about the issues. Issue number one when singing high notes is that we flip into the head register and then it becomes breathy. Okay, and we don't want that breathiness if it's not intentional, if it's not the style we want. Okay, and the reason why we don't want it to be breathy is because you think, or I think, it sounds weak. Okay, we want it to be powerful and strong and resonant. Okay, so what we need to do is bring our voice forward to the mask of our face rather than having it kind of sit in our throat. And when we jump from a low note to a high note, we are going to pass something called the vocal break. And anytime we pass that vocal break, we kind of flip. We do this like whoop into the new register. Okay? And so maybe that's what you're going through when you are attempting a song that goes from a low note to a high note above the vocal break. And then you're like, well, how do I fix that? Okay, well, identify where your vocal break is. And then figure out, are you in your chest voice or are you in your head voice? If you're in your head voice, you're going to need to mix. You add a little bit more weight of the chest voice with the head voice. For example, if I go, you're here, there's no, that's the flip that I don't want, right? There's chest. I'm starting with the chest and then I go, nothing to fear. So the issue with that is I'm running out of air faster and then resulting in me losing my voice, okay? And that's gonna dry out your throat even faster, and then that's gonna cause strain, okay? So we really need to think about our technique when attempting these high notes. Not only does it sound impressive when we can do it correctly, but it also saves your voice from future damage, okay? Too much breathiness can cause dryness. I'm not saying a little bit of breathiness is bad. A little bit is fine, but too much in excess will cause dryness later. Okay, so that's why we want to aim for a more resonant sound. Yeah. All right, so that's an example of how when you jump from a low note to a high note, we tend to do that flip and then it gets breathy and it sounds kind of spacey. Okay, and we don't want that. Although we do want space in our mouth to reach the high notes, that's the wrong type of spaciness that we want. We want to bring our voice forward. We want to get that sound to the roof of our mouth and vibrating there. And that's where you get the power. You feel this ball of energy resonating at the front of your face. Okay? So issue number 2 is that we tend to pull our chest voice up way too high above the vocal bridge in the attempt to make it sound stronger. Sometimes you might understand the concept that you need to mix your head voice with your chest voice to make it sound stronger, to have a smoother transition from a low note to a high note. However, be careful not to pull your chest voice all the way up, hiking your larynx up this high. See what it does to my voice? It chokes me out. Okay, air can't go through, and then I tighten up my neck muscles, and then my larynx can't move. It feels all rigid and stiff, and we don't want that. Okay, we need their larynx to be able to move up and down freely. We do want it to stay in a neutral position as much as we can. However, if you are planning on singing something higher, and especially if you plan on mixed belting, it is going to be a little floaty, a little elevated, just a little bit. But the goal is to anchor our larynx down as much as possible so that, again, we don't hike it up too high and then choke ourselves out, because then that's going to cause injury and it doesn't sound good either. Okay, so if you are pulling your chest voice up all the way past your vocal break, what that does to your pitch is that it brings your pitch down and then you become flat. Okay, so before we talked about what the chest voice does when it needs to go into a lower pitch. It needs to shorten, right? So therefore, if you are pulling your chest voice up past your vocal break, your vocal cords want to shorten. And so it's going to pull that pitch down. And that's why you might become flat when you're trying to sing a high note with power. Okay, so that's issue number 2, is just pulling the chest voice up way too high. It's too heavy, it's too harsh for your vocal cords, and it just hurts if you do it like that, and it doesn't sound good either. So I'll show you an example of what that might sound like. Do not attempt this, I'm just showing you an example, okay? So if I go, you're here, then I can't even do it for that long, right? It just hurts. Okay, and I just feel a bunch of squeeze right here around my throat. My larynx is just stiffening up and it's tightening, and it's just not good. When you sing, especially when you're singing high notes, you want to sing it with freedom and ease. And what I just did was not freedom and ease, right? So be careful not to do that. What you want to learn how to do is mix, is transition from your low note to your high notes seamlessly. So you need to do a bunch more mixed voice exercises so that you get your voice to the front of your face, okay? And if the voice is at the front of the face, then transitioning from a low note to a high note becomes a lot more easier, okay? Now, issue number 3 is that we tighten up our face muscles too much to look like we are doing something impressive. I know that expression is important. Yes, keep doing it, but be aware of what's going on with your face. If you scrunch up your face to reach that high note like this, look at the tension that is happening around my throat. Okay? I know you want to do this just to like look more impressive and look like you're trying to hit that note, but that's just too much. You know, again, we want freedom and ease. That's not freedom and ease. Maybe you can have an expression more like that. That's more open. There's more space to it. You're lifting your soft palate. You're anchoring your larynx, right? You're not being squished in like a little ball. You're being squished down. Open. Practice that before you sing, because the way your face moves affects your tongue, affects your mouth shape, and affects your breathing as well. So that's another issue that we don't talk about often, because we talk about the vocal cords a lot, but your facial structures affects everything else. And if your mouth shape is not in a way for better and effective singing, it's gonna pull on the muscles around your larynx. And then what happens if you pull on those muscles? You get vocal strain, you get tightness, and then you get vocal fatigue, okay? And then you might lose your voice if you keep doing it like that. So those are the 3 issues I want you to identify when you are attempting high notes and you really, really want to make it sound more powerful. Try not to do those 3 things, okay? So let's recap. Issue number 1 was flipping into that head voice, so then you get breathy, and then you dry out your voice. Issue number 2 is that you're pulling up your chest voice way too high above the vocal break. So you really need to know where that break is for you so that you can transition better over it. Issue number 3 is try not to tighten up your face muscles too much, or you're gonna get tightness in the throat, okay? We wanna aim for freedom and ease when we're singing our higher notes. Now that we have identified the issues, we can figure out ways to make our head voice notes more powerful. So I like to start with figuring out how to make my high notes less breathy, especially when I jump from a low note to a high note. How do I make sure I don't flip? For example, you're here, there's nothing to fear. So I am essentially mixing that head voice notes. Rather than going, nothing to fear, I'm going, nothing to fear. I already made it sound more powerful than it was before. Okay, so you can stop there and just sing it like that. You can make it clean, you can make it resonant just by doing that. Okay, just make sure you get that sound to the roof of your mouth. There, starting in your chest, there's nothing to fear. And then I keep it there vibrating in the mask of my face. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to get more content like this, and hit the like button if this was helpful to you. If you want the extended version of this video where I show you some vocal exercises and solutions to singing high notes with more power, make sure you check out that video on my Patreon or get access to that by becoming a channel member. Also, get on my newsletter if you want to know more about my upcoming courses and learn more about my private lessons at my studio. But thank you so much for watching. That's all for now, and I'll see you next time.